Hello and welcome to the Answer Yes podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I have Bryce Henson on the line. He is calling in from Southern California. Bryce, really good to meet you.
Jim, thanks so much for having me on the show. Super pumped to be here.
You're down in Corona, California. I've got a lot of background there. Matter of fact, my mom used to live there, and it used to really be a cowboy town, because you got Norco right there and the whole bit. So
Oh
welcome
yeah,
to the show.
thank you.
Yeah, once in a while we'll dip in and out of the fitness industry on my guests, and it resonates well with me because I think fitness is so important to our health and well-being, especially as it relates to your ability to conduct business and be a family man and be all that you can be. And I think in this time and era of us all being super conscious of diseases and things that are going around, just being healthy is so important. So I'm thrilled to have you on. And as you probably have learned through some of your research, the show is about saying yes to opportunities, and I want to hear about your yeses. Would you mind giving us some background on yourself? Maybe where you came from, where you grew up, and how you wind up in Corona, California?
Yeah, no, totally. So I originally tell people I'm from the Midwest, which would be true. I spent 11 years there in my later childhood, early adult, but I'm actually really originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I spent the first 10 years there. When I was a little boy, I used to talk like this when I was a little guy with the Southern draw. So I say Atlanta loosely. It was about a suburb about half an hour south. And 30 years ago, it was definitely, a country town and still is to some extent. But in any case, I had a very turbulent, childhood. And I always say that a very traumatic situation was actually a blessing disguised as a tragedy happened to me at my youth. And as it turns out, my father was a drug addict. He was an alcoholic and he was addicted to gambling, not necessarily a trifecta. Conducive to a good family upbringing.
Yeah.
And a lot of turmoil, a lot of verbal abuse that happened. And I was young. I was the oldest of three. So I could, sense some things that were going on. I didn't have a full, understanding being only 6, 7, 8 years old at the time. But certainly I remember the very traumatic situation, which is the straw that broke the camel's back. And after a long bender, my father was out, had gambled away thousands of dollars, came home in a drunken stupor. And up until that point, the arguments between my parents were very verbal based, but unfortunately that one night things got physical, and my dad ended up in a drunken stupor, chasing my mom, attacked her. My mom ultimately found herself on a bed, being strangled, gasping for air, and really fighting for her life. By the grace of God, my sister kind of, walked through the door, confused my father. She slipped his grip like a bat out of hell, got out of that room, escaped the house, and our life, completely changed. And a few days later, we were on a flight to Michigan, where my grandma lived. By the grace of God, we were able to stay with her for the better part of 10 years. Where our family, we lived in a very tiny, humble house, but thankfully we had a roof over our head. My grandma had a room, my brother and I had a room, and then my mother and my sister shared a room and a bed for a better part of a decade while we got on our feet.
Wow.
So I start there because I think I can share, at least when I look back at that story, in the following 10 years that ensued of, trial and tribulation and, running out of money before we ran out of month, very stressful situation. But I pulled away 3 big takeaways. Number one, work ethic. And I see my mom kind of scrap and be crafty and resourceful and really work her tail off, not only, from a full-time position, but also, raising 3 kids on her own. It really developed a strong sense of work ethic, which is a message I want to share with your audience. Number two, it really opened my eyes to being self-reliant and understanding. And this is a very cold message. However, it's a very impactful message that I learned at a young age. And the fact of the matter, Jim, and your audience, no one is coming to save you. No one is coming on a white horse to pick you up and save you. You have to save yourself. This is self-reliance. And while it was a tough pill to swallow at an early age, I realized that work ethic and self-reliance were just so critical. And again, even though it was a tough pill to swallow, that mindset has carried me through. And the last thing would just be relationships, and really having my family bond together, and the adversity that we had overcome really shone some light on the value of relationships, which, I share, I storytell, I showcase that because I think those 3 lessons are just very valuable. They've been very valuable to me in my life, and certainly with your audience. So that was kind of the foundation, if you will, of, my childhood.
Yeah, we can just end the show right there. Lesson learned. Well, it's interesting. I've seen a lot of little memes on Instagram recently about, treat this person nice because you don't know what they're going through or what just happened in their life. Maybe somebody just cut them off or they had a bad morning or something. I'm not saying we have to treat you nice, but it's like when we look at you and your success, like, well, we don't know what this person's gone through to get where he's at today. What a spectacular early beginning of learning for you and your family and survival. And wow, I appreciate your transparency. I didn't mean to cut you off on your momentum of your story, but I'm just awestruck in your survival and what transitioned in your life early on.
Yeah, no worries at all. I don't want to kind of break just to get some dialogue. But in any case, I guess transitioning and before I get into the fitness industry, because really the opening ended question was, what was your background? So I always usually like to start there because there's some learning lessons in my youth that I know can be valuable for your audience. But the second thing, and I know the theme of this podcast is saying yes. So I have an incredible story to share as I entered college, and I put myself through school, bootstrapped it, worked about 15 jobs from the time I was 12 to 21. I used to donate blood plasma just to, pay tuition and had about a bunch of loans and was scrappy, probably like you, Jim, and many of your audience. So, again, the value of work ethic and resiliency, those learning lessons. But when my senior year of college took hold, I ended up getting an internship, which moved me to LA, which we'll talk about. That's actually how I started my path in the fitness industry. But a very fortuitous situation happened to me, which really changed my life. And as I was going through school, I graduated just under 4 years, actually 3.5 years at Michigan State. And they have a huge study abroad program, actually for a public university, one of the biggest study abroad programs in the country. And so they really talk about studying abroad from the very beginning. So I was indoctrinated, but it wasn't until my junior year, which I decided to go to a career fair. And so I checked out the career fair, and I only had a limited amount of classes that I needed, but there was 3 programs that I qualified for. The first study abroad program was to Greece. The second was to Argentina. And the third was this little study abroad program that was the first year in existence called Advertising in Asia. And as I went through the career fair, when I was like reviewing the notes, my initial thought was, I'm going to Greece. Okay, that sounds awesome. All right. But then as I looked into the program, as it turns out, it was more credits than I needed. And I already was self-funded and I had, nearly $50,000 of debt. So I didn't want to take on more credits than I actually needed. And then the same thing with Argentina. So I was kind of in a bind. So I was out to dinner one day with a buddy of mine, and he said, Bryce, I understand that you want to go to Greece, but it doesn't really make logistical sense because of the credits. The same thing with Argentina. But let me ask you this. Can you ever envision yourself going to Greece? And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And he's like, okay, well, how about Argentina? And I said, yeah, that sounds awesome too. I want to visit one day. He goes, how about Asia? Can you ever envision yourself going to Japan, Hong Kong, or Singapore, which is really where the program was founded or based? And I stopped Jim and I said, you know what? I don't know. And he said, Bryce, that's exactly what you need to do, because at the end of the day, you want to expand your horizons and you only have a few spins on this globe. So you want to maximize your opportunities. And I went home that night and I really had a deep conversation with myself. And I said, you know what? He's absolutely right. And as it turns out, I've been to Greece a few times. I've been to Argentina, great vacations. But without actually that recommendation, I never would have put myself on a flight to Tokyo in May of 2004, which absolutely rocked my world. So by saying yes to that opportunity is really the catapult that led me to actually take the move to California and be, the CEO of FitBody Bootcamp. And certainly other things, happened between then, but that was a really foundational experience to open my minds, to get me moving where opportunities then presented themselves.
What a great piece of advice from your friend to go do that, because he's absolutely right. Oftentimes things comes our way and we say no because we're unafraid, or it doesn't sound great enough because there's other choices. But like you suggested, making that choice was a perfect one, because you're going to go to those other places. I wound up in the middle of Morocco one time, never thought I would go there, and I spent a week there and had the best time of my life, and will always reflect back on that trip and what we did. Matter of fact, it was only a few months after September 11th, so it was a really odd time to be in a Muslim country, but how wonderful. What were some of the things that you picked up over there? I realized it was related to school and everything, but anything stick with you on that time over there?
Well, I think just the biggest thing, Jim, was just it shocked my system, because there I was. Yeah. I had the first 10 years in Georgia, like I had a Southern upbringing, but then because of the traumatic situation, I really, spent the next 10, 11 years in the Midwest, really not leaving the Midwest. Again, humble beginnings. We didn't have money to travel or anything. So by putting myself on a flight to Tokyo, Japan first, then China, then Singapore, I think the biggest takeaway was just so different. I mean, you think about when you travel, especially in, Latin-based or our alphabet type of companies or languages, I should say. You go to Spain or Mexico, you certainly don't, unless you're fluent in Spanish, you can't speak the language, but you can still read, you can still write, you can still like put it together. When you go to Japan, I mean, immediately your language is taken away, your ability to read, write is taken away. It was just so different for me. It just rocked my mindset and really opened my mind. And I guess I'll finish my thought on this. And I'm so embarrassing to say, I'm humbling myself, but I was the guy that freshman year at the career fair, when I went to the international kind of, building with all the foreign students, I was the guy that was like, foreign kids, get out of my country. Like, what are you guys doing here? And now I look back and that was just so wrong of me, and how humbled I am for that. But I think without that experience in Asia, just being so, exposed to something so different, it wouldn't have opened my mind than to take the opportunity in California, then open my mind to basically take a chance at fitness. Then I ended up living in South America for a couple of years in 2010 and 2012. Without this foundational experience to really open my mind, Jim, I don't think I would have done it.
You know what? It's a wonderful point. Again, you're being very transparent. As the United States becomes more and more of a melting pot from different countries that we have not seen here before, in the past, typically we'd see a lot of Hispanics or Canadians, some Europeans, but now we're a melting pot of everything, as we're all aware of. But, until you have an opportunity to travel to some of these countries, you don't understand the culture and what their background is and why their beliefs are what they are, why their habits are what they are. And once you can do that, you really have an understanding of how they conduct business or live their lives. And it has allowed me personally, because I've traveled to tons of countries, to really understand, what the makeup of this person that maybe I'm doing business with here in Southern California where you're at, Yeah. So what a great experience. If you're young and you're listening to the show, if you have an opportunity to travel abroad to any country, it really is worth the effort and time and energy to experience that and see what it's like to grow. So anyways, thanks for sharing that part.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 100%.
So moving on, you get back from this trip, life-changing. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, well, so I ended up then securing myself inspired just at this eye-opening experience. And actually, the one last thing I want to say, even though I'm embarrassed at my mindset when I look back when I was 18, one, I'm so glad I said yes to the opportunity, which opened my mind. And you mentioned this, Jim, a second ago, the growth opportunity. So I do think there's actually value, even though I was embarrassed. And this is a great message for your audience. If you're not looking back at your life and not being a little bit embarrassed on your moves that you made previously, it shows that you're not growing. You're not taking new opportunities. You're not saying yes. So as much as sometimes I beat myself up about that experience, I realized that actually that growth experience made me better. So there's value there. But and all that to say, that experience opened my mind. Ended up securing an internship in Los Angeles, California in 2004, which then parlayed actually into a full-time gig. So after spending just under 4 years at school, and at that point, I was not in the fitness industry. In fact, embarrassingly to say, which is in the same thread, Taco Bell was the staple of my diet. So I moved to Southern California, 21 years old, from an opportunity. Excited to be in California, the palm trees, the blue skies, the ocean, all that California has to offer. And certainly there was many good days, but if I'm being honest with you, Jim, there was a lot more down days than good. I think number one, I was very young, had very little professional skills to offer the world. Number two, I was 3,000 miles from home, so I didn't know anyone, and your audience can relate to that, being homesick a bit. And lastly, I wasn't a fit guy, and I wasn't obese by any stretch of the imagination, but I wasn't fit. I didn't live a healthy fit lifestyle. I didn't have the energy, the confidence, the enthusiasm I do now. And I had about 20 pounds of body fat, very little muscle on my body. After spending about a year and a half in that particular, dilemma, if you will, and thinking myself, second guessing, did I make the right move? Fortuitous situation happened. And speaking of which, we were talking offline, Orange County, where Jim, you're from. I lived there for the better part of 10 years. Ended up moving to Orange County because one of my good friends from college got a job in Irvine. So